but you're building your beekeeping around Varroa instead of around being a good beekeeper. To your point of whether or not a treatment worked, especially as the conventional chemicals are failing, those are the ones you really want to keep an eye on, because if you put in a product, it's worked for you for years and you rely on it, and suddenly the Varroa populations take off. It's simply resistance has developed. And that's when beekeepers start to panic and they start putting layers. Well, I've always relied on this product, so I'll leave it in. But I'm going to add this and I'm going to add that. And so you become a Varroa hunter instead of just simply managing it in a simple, established program that you can rely on going forward. And that's what NOD offers to the beekeeping world with Formic Pro.
A point that I'd really like to make too, because I hear people asking these questions all the time. No treatments, at least in North America, and I think also in Europe, are registered for use simultaneously with other treatments. So you should not be applying multiple treatments at the same time, regardless of what the treatment is.
What populations? Can you identify the populations you're talking about in this slide?
So these data are two different types of monitoring. The blue line at the bottom is the monitoring that most of us are familiar with. That is the alcohol wash monitoring. So we're taking a sample of adult bees, they're typically nurse bees, and we're counting the number of Varroa per bee effectively. The other two are, it's a little bit more involved of a type of sampling called an operculated brood biopsy, or just cell uncapping. I think a lot of people would call it that. So we're taking frames of capped brood out and we're uncapping a random 100 of worker pupa and also drone pupa. So the yellow line is the drone brood and the orange line is the worker brood. So what these data show is the percentage of cells that we opened, how many of those contained live Varroa.
So this is going right into the brood.
That's right.
And so for our product, we're looking at causing mortality to Varroa mites under the cap. But overall, this slide is looking at the mites' rate of infestation. So they're going after drone brood, they're going after worker brood, but they're also feeding off the adult bees. So this slide is looking at the 3 feeding sites of the Varroa mite.
Absolutely. And it's quite evident here that when we've applied a treatment versus when we haven't. So if we haven't, the rate of infestation in all 3 of those populations, the worker and drone pupa and the adult workers, is actually higher. Now, it's really evident in the drones, which is where, of course, the Varroa prefer to be. But if you look at the untreated controls, you can also see that the rate of infestation in both the worker, adults, and pupa is quite elevated relative to the treatment group. So the effect is kind of washed out by the drones, again, because that's where the Varroa prefer to be. But if you remember, in the traditional IPM models, people are advocating for treatment when Varroa reach in alcohol wash infestation levels of 1 to 3%. And the graph here is showing that, especially into July and August, in the untreated groups, both the adult and developing workers have infestation levels approaching 10%. So that's actually quite high. Whereas the treated groups, the Formic Pro groups, stay almost effectively at 0 up until that September time point. And what's going to happen is when the drones stop being produced later on in the season, you can actually really see this difference here. Those Varroa have to go somewhere. They don't want to be in the workers, but they don't have a choice. So they have to go in there. And so you can see at the point, so during 2024, in August, that was the last month that we saw drone brood.
Okay.
In September, you can see the infestation rate in the worker brood, which is your functional unit in the colony. That's what's actually doing the stuff in the colony. The infestation rate shoots way up. In the untreated control groups, it's up above 50%. That means every second cell we opened had Varroa in it. That's huge.
Right, and that, when we're looking at honeybee populations, it's the worker bees raised in this September period and then into October that will make up the winter bee population. So in a certain sense, those drone broods that were raised up until the end of August were protecting the worker bee population. Once they stop being produced, those Varroa mites transition to reproducing under the worker cell caps and have a severe impact on the health of the colony.
Absolutely.
So this model of IPM takes into account all those things.
Our model of IPM.
Our model of
Yes.
IPM,
Yes.
as opposed to the historic model of IPM that simply monitored the amount of Varroa. We're looking where they are, what their targets of parasitism is, and we're going forward basing it on the biology of the honeybee colony.
Yes. So I will say in this study, we were manipulating spring treatment, and so that was the focus in this study. And we applied Formic Pro actually to both of these groups in mid-September, which you can see from these data here is maybe a little bit late, honestly.
Okay.
Because the population, even in the treated group, it hasn't ramped up nearly as far as what it did in the untreated group. It's still around 40%, whereas the untreated group is 55%, so that's actually a pretty big difference.
If memory serves, it was what, September 17th?
Yes.
Right. So you're right, just past the midway point of September. So ideally, you're proposing it would be in the first half of September.
I would say in this year in particular, this was actually a longer year than what we typically experience. Right. I would have pushed it maybe even into late August, early September.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can see even in our sampling point in August, which was about midway through August, the populations hadn't really expanded too much, although the drone infestation rate is coming up a bit there. Yeah. But getting in there before there's a substantial burden of Varroa and getting the treatment done so that during the development of those winter bees, you can have the lowest level of Varroa. And I talked about how we can never really eliminate Varroa totally, but you want to optimize that low level to coincide with when those winter bees are being produced.
So as a commercial beekeeper, when I'm looking at the benefit-risk ratio, then if I'm still seeing some of my honey crop come in, I might say, I'm willing to live with a bit more Varroa for another 10 days or so. And those 10 days, I can get my honey crop in a little bit more because that pays the bills. But then there'll still be enough time for the colony to produce a couple cycles of full, healthy brood, even if I treat as late as mid-September. Because in my own operation, I know sometimes I get behind and I haven't had the ability to treat until the last half of September or even right to the end of September. And those colonies have still rebounded, produced a healthy winter cluster bees and taken me through till spring. So we can't, in my mind, we have to step away from the model of being focused on Varroa and look at the biology of the honeybee and say, can they still produce me a healthy winter cluster after I've gotten my honey crop? So you're weighing your benefit risks with all these decisions in an IPM model, but this is something which we can do based on the information you're presenting. And I agree that optimally, to protect the bees, you might want to treat end of August or early September, but from a strictly economic point of view, if your honey crop is still coming in and you want to wait for a little bit, it's not going to really impinge on the overall success of wintering, from personal experience.
Yeah, and I agree with you fully. It's a balancing act, and you want to optimize whatever is going to give you the best economic outcome. So.
Right. Hello, beekeepers. Is your Varroa IPM working for you? We have created a 5-part series to help beekeepers answer that question. In this 5-part series, we'll be discussing the following topics: threshold versus goal-driven IPM, protecting populations, where are your Varroa and viruses, and the focus on fall treatments. See you there. Thanks for watching another episode of Behind the Hive. Please feel free to add your questions or concerns in the comment section. Give us a like if you're enjoying these videos, and we look forward to being with you again in the future.